All right, y'all, welcome to the show. So today I have some quite unfortunate news. Hezbollah and Israel are in a state of all-out war at this point. The tit-for-tat violence has escalated out of control. We'll talk about that. I have some new information. Torture has been detailed. The Israelis are doing some horrific things to Palestinian hostages. We have also fake Israeli humanitarian aid inspection. This story is incredible. So they're holding up the humanitarian aid on purpose in a way that is incredibly deceptive, disingenuous, misleading. It's orchestrated. They just want to block Palestinians from getting aid, and so they go through this whole dog and pony show and kabuki theater to block the aid from getting in. So we'll talk about that. Then later on in the show, we have a big Trump corruption scandal that just came out. We have Biden taking the gloves off and officially launching his campaign and comparing Trump to Hitler. We have war between the DNC and New Hampshire. This is an incredible story. They've been at war for a while, but it just escalated quite a bit. And then later on, again, we have Cornel West versus Sean Hannity. They have a absolute scream fest. And we have big news about Mehdi Hasan. Mehdi Hasan is officially fully out at MSNBC. We'll give you the backstory there. All right, so without any further ado, let's go ahead and jump into it. And everybody do me a big favor. Please subscribe to the channel. It helps out massively in the algorithm. It doesn't cost you anything. And also, remember, I've never had a conversation with an advertiser. If you support this show and you support these long Israel segments, do me a favor and either tip with the thanks button on YouTube or support on Patreon. Because you guys help build this show from the ground up. And usually these sorts of segments get demonetized instantly. So anyway, and I love all of you guys who do help out this show. You mean the world, and we couldn't do it without you. All right, so without any further ado, let's go ahead and dive into it here. So we got news the other day that Hezbollah had launched a bunch of rockets at an Israeli Air Force base. And guess what? They actually hit many of the targets they were going for, and there was some significant damage that was done to the Israeli Air Force base. So this, of course, is in retaliation to one of their commanders being killed. Israel has been bombing, honestly, all over the place. They bombed Beirut in Lebanon when they were going after a top Hamas official. They bombed Syria, a top Hezbollah official in Syria. And what you're seeing here is these tit-for-tat escalations that have officially sort of spiraled out of control. And so now, as I talk to you guys live here, there's some earlier reports that there's an attempt from Hamas, they say, to bomb Tel Aviv, that there's a bunch of rockets that are heading for Tel Aviv. Insofar as I could tell to this point, it looks like the Iron Dome is intercepting a lot of those bombs, a lot of those missiles. But again, this is what we've been warning about from day one, that with Israel's increasing belligerence, that this can all go out of control, and next thing you know, there was an interesting point made the other day about how top U.S. intelligence officials are running war games simulations, with the basis of what's going on right now, and every single time it spirals out of control into a broader regional war, and that's exactly what we're witnessing. So Hezbollah attacked this Israeli Air Force base in retaliation for their commanders being killed. Let me give you a little bit more on this here. This is from I-24 News, an Israeli news outlet. Listen to this.
Although there was a barrage of rockets and missiles yesterday by Hezbollah. Hezbollah claimed to have fired 62 projectiles towards Israel, and one of them is particularly interesting and particularly worrying as well. Hezbollah has claimed to struck a very strategic Israeli Air Force facility, that is a radar facility of the Israeli Air Force on Mount Meron. Now, until now, Israel didn't really fear the possibility of that facility, if the claims of Hezbollah are correct, to be hit, because that structure is pretty high up on the mountain, pretty far away from the border. And Israel, of course, has the Iron Dome missile defense system to protect facilities like these from being hit. The news today is that the IDF now assesses that the projectile that hit that radar facility was in fact an advanced anti-tank missile, a Cornet EM, that is a more advanced system of those Cornet missiles. Unlike the regular ones, this one can reach up to 10 kilometers in range. It is a precision-guided missile with a laser beam that was able to hit, if that is correct, a very strategic, a very sensitive point for the Israeli Air Force. That sort of a radar facility is the one that enables the Israeli Air Force to control all of its aerial activity in the north, like we saw perhaps in that strike in Beirut last week, and so many other Israeli airstrikes in the region. I can also remind you and our viewers that just prior to the October 7th attack, Hamas has struck so many of Israel's surveillance systems, the cameras and other more advanced facilities, and even on October 7th itself was able to use drones to hit some of the very important strategic defense and radar systems on the border, what enabled Hamas to go on with that attack. And of course, that is extremely worrying if Israel's surveillance systems in the northern part of the next to the Lebanese border will also severely hit if Hezbollah's claims are correct.
So, in other words, they've taken out some of Israel's capacity to attack North Gaza by going after this airbase. And it looks like the Israelis have perpetually underestimated Hezbollah and their capabilities and the advanced nature of their weaponry. And so, again, what Hezbollah is doing here is in reaction to their top commanders being killed. But of course, Israel is going to do what Israel does, and they're going to turn around. And here we go. Another Hezbollah commander, Jawad, was killed in Lebanon. Wissam al-Tawil, known as Jawad, a key Hezbollah area commander, was reportedly killed in an airstrike in Kirbat Salem, Lebanon. Jawad, a reportedly significant figure within Hezbollah, played a pivotal role in the organization's operations southern Lebanon. So, again, just what I keep telling you guys, this is how things spiral out of control. You have one belligerent attack from Israel, then you have a retaliatory move from Hezbollah, then you have another retaliation from Israel, and we're off to the races. So this is another interesting development here. Costco suspends, not Costco as in like, the store where everything is priced fairly and they pay their workers well, not that one with the cheap hot dogs, no. Costco suspends Israel shipments amid Red Sea tension. So the shipping company Costco. Costco, controlling 5.2% of global shipping capacity, halts all shipments to Israel following Houthi attacks in the Red Sea. This decision mirrors actions by MSC, CMA, CGM, Maersk, and Hapag-Lloyd, significantly impacting global trade routes and Israel's access to goods. So, again, these are some further consequences of the Houthis' actions on the Red Sea. It is really crippling trade with Israel. Like I said, the companies that are still willing to deliver, the insurance rates have shot up massively, and many companies are just not willing to deliver there anymore. And so they're getting not nearly as many goods as they would like to get. And again, this is a consequence of the absolute slaughter that's happening in Gaza. So the far-right Israeli minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir, said that mass immigration of Palestinians and renewal of Israeli settlements in Gaza is, quote, the order of the hour, as Israel faces South Africa's petition in the ICJ accusing it of forcible displacement of Gazans. So in other words, I've said this all along, guys, that the far-right in Israel, they're just the most honest. It's not like the so-called liberals in Israel, particularly in positions of power in the government. It's not like they disagree. It's just that they mask and cloak their position more effectively and drape it in humanitarian-sounding language. The far right is more brutally honest. And so Itamar Ben-Gvir and Smotrich and Netanyahu and people to his right, they just come out and say, we want to thin out Gaza. We want to do, voluntary migration. Oops, did I bomb your house? I guess your migration is not that voluntary now, is it? And so he's coming out and saying, ethnic cleansing. Now, of course, what happens along with this is it gets written down, it gets put in the ICJ case, they have the direct quotes, they know what the official policy is, and this will be used against Israel as the argument is made that they are committing the crime of genocide. And this guy, frankly, is too honest, but also too stupid and barbaric to realize that what he's doing is 100% undermining any potential Israeli defense, because this is what they're dead set on. They are dead set on ethnic cleansing, and he can't hide it. He's too excited by the prospect of ethnic cleansing. So Israel's Knesset is hosting a conference on building settlements in Gaza, where precise maps and plans are going to be presented on January 28th. Thousands of Israelis are applying to colonize Gaza. MPs and public figures are encouraging this. This is not an extremist fantasy. So again, this is from the chief of communications from the human rights group Euromed Monitor, Mohammed Shahada. We've used a lot of his stuff every step of the way here. And look, I remember early on, I pointed out, oh yeah, they're definitely going to resettle Gaza, at the very least northern Gaza, but probably all of Gaza. And there were a lot of skeptics. There were a lot of people going, oh, no, that can't be. They said they'd never do that. What are you talking about? Well, I mean, what do you call it when North Gaza is totally wiped off the map? And then you have IDF videos coming out of there where there's an Israeli flag every 30 or 40 feet planted in the ground. What is it when you have Israeli real estate companies coming out and saying, we're going to build on the beach in Gaza? What is that? Occam's razor, the most likely scenario based on the evidence staring you in the face is that, yeah, they're going to resettle Gaza. Of course. And now we get further confirmation of that here. So this story is wild. Kenneth Roth, the former executive director of Human Rights Watch, tweeted this: death in Gaza by Israeli bureaucracy during the process for inspecting humanitarian aid. If Israeli inspectors reject a single item in a truck, it must return with its entire cargo to be repackaged, starting the weeks-long process all over again. So I just want to explain to you what's going on here. So this is the headline in the AP. There's a great article about this where they detail what's happening here. But the title is, Cumbersome Process and Arbitrary Israeli Inspections Slow Aid Delivery into Gaza, U.S. Senators Say. So by the way, I just want to give credit to the senators who went. I believe Merkley was one of them, and then there was one other, Chris Van Holly and Jeff Merkley. They went there. I don't even think the AP would have written this article if it wasn't for the senators verifying what's happening, because it sounds so unbelievable and extreme that I can imagine it just being swatted aside as, nah, that can't be true. But what they explain on the ground very clearly, there are lines of trucks, hundreds of trucks long, and they are waiting to get into Gaza to deliver the much-needed humanitarian aid. I mean, you have up to anywhere from 50% to 90% of the population doesn't have enough food to eat. They're starving. When an aid truck does get through, they get swarmed and swamped by a mob of people because they're so starving. I have to get food. I have to get food. There's no way around this. And so, but what's Israel doing? So they open up the border crossing for only 8 hours a day. Mind you, the population is starving. This is a 24-hour operation. No, they purposefully say, no, we're only going to open it for 8 hours a day. And then they will do these inspections where they force the trucks, take everything off the truck. We're going to look through it, then put everything back on the truck. By the way, that's already absurd, right? And if they see one thing that we're going to go ahead and reject this, then the truck gets kicked out and the aid doesn't get delivered. So what are some of the things they're rejecting? In a lot of the aid trucks, there are tents because, the houses are bombed and destroyed and people have nowhere to sleep. So they send in tents. If a truck has a tent, they go, nope, we're kicking you out. Why? I don't know. The pipes that are in the tent might be used for making some sort of bomb or missile, so we're kicking you out. And this is what's happening day in and day out. They're rejecting so many of the aid trucks. And here's the thing, man. They frame it as like bureaucracy run amok. No. That's naive to look at it like that. This is not bureaucracy run amok. This is purposeful. They know what they're doing. They know they shouldn't be rejecting these trucks, but they reject them anyway. They know that. And so this is the purposeful starvation and deprivation of basic human necessities and rights for Palestinians. That's what's happening here. And when you read the article to their credit, you get the sense when you look at the specifics, that's exactly what this is. But of course, they frame it in the more naive way in the headline where they say, cumbersome process and arbitrary Israeli inspections, slow aid delivery into Gaza. Wild stuff. I highly recommend you read the whole article. There's a lot of really damning facts in there which shed light on this atrocity. So we also have this in Haaretz. Israeli police said a 3-year-old Palestinian girl was killed by stray gunfire at a West Bank checkpoint when border police shot at another car that had deliberately rammed into an Israeli policewoman there. Now, there's also a video that's going viral now of a woman holding the hand of a kid who looks maybe a little older than a toddler. And they're leading in front of a group. Everybody's holding white flags and waving them. and the woman gets shot, and the little kid has to run away and try to run back to the group of people. This is the sort of stuff that we're seeing on a daily basis. Trita Parsi says here, there are more and more reports of this kind. Hani Mahmoud of Al Jazeera reports that Israeli soldiers call out a man from Gaza to exit his house. An Israeli drone then kills him with a bullet to the head. When his nephew came out to check on him, he was killed too. So let's watch this here. Then we'll talk a little bit about there's more journalists who appear to be targeted and murdered on purpose by Israel.
The latest what we heard is just a person who was called by his name to come out of his house, and just within meters away from his house was targeted by these attacking drones that fired directly at his head and killed him. And when his brother came out to check on him to see what's going on with him, he was shot at, and then his son came after, and he was killed right at the same time they were shooting at the other people. But this is the scene that is quite horrifying. And when we talked to some of the people who made it to Rafah city and described the horror from overnight and an early hour of this morning as they were trying to leave the central area, describe it in one word: it's hell on earth.
In the face of unimaginable loss, our colleague stands as a testament to courage that transcends the confines of his resilience, bravery embodied in the decision to continue to do live coverage despite the shattering blow of losing a beloved son. So this guy lost his son. This woman here says, Israel just killed his eldest son, Hamza, also a journalist. So another journalist targeted by Israel. First, they killed this guy's mother, brother, sister, and nephew. Then they killed his wife, 7-year-old daughter, and 15-year-old son, sheltering at the Nusayrat refugee camp, and he remains steadfast. This guy is still doing his job, this Al Jazeera journalist. You want to talk about bravery? By the way, this is the most deadly conflict for journalists in history. Over 100 journalists have been killed, as I'm explaining to you here. For many of those cases, it appears to be targeted on purpose. Okay. So this is another wild story. Inside Israel's torture camp for Gaza detainees, Palestinians arrested in the northern Gaza Strip describe how Israeli soldiers systematically abuse civilians and combatants alike, from severe deprivation to brutal physical violence. So this article from Plus 972 magazine. Now, by the way, this was the same outlet which came out and explained in great detail how they're using. Israel says they are using AI to come up with targets and coordinates to strike. And effectively in the article, they explain they are doing terror bombing, and they are doing it on purpose. They want to create a, quote, shock through the civilian population to try to create an uprising so they kick out Hamas. So they did phenomenal reporting before. Listen to this. According to these testimonies, Israeli soldiers subjected Palestinian detainees to electric shocks, burned their skin with lighters, spat in their mouths, and deprived them of sleep, food, and access to bathrooms until they defecated on themselves. Many were tied to a fence for hours, handcuffed and blindfolded for most of the day. Some testified having been beaten all over their bodies and having cigarettes extinguished on their necks or backs. Several people are known to have died as a result of being held in these conditions. So Israel is torturing people to death. They are torturing Palestinian hostages, political prisoners, to death. All of this is illegal under international law. Haaretz reveals the first image of the Sde Timan prison where Israel detains Gazans near its borders. So what's been exposed there is sleeping exposed without winter clothes, constantly blindfolded, subjected to physical torture for everything all the time. So here's a picture coming out of there. This goes hand in hand with those pictures that we've seen. Time and time again, you have groups of Palestinian men, no evidence whatsoever that they're Hamas, and they are forced to strip down to their underwear and be humiliated relentlessly. We've had countless examples of that happening. So we also have this here. British-born Israeli soldier Levi Simon recorded a video of him searching Gaza homes for supposed weapons, claiming to find money instead. He then proceeds to rummage through personal belongings, making derogatory comments about drawers filled with lingerie and nightwear. Guys, I hope that the International Court of Justice and the South African attorneys who are moving forward and prosecuting this case of genocide, I hope they have their eyes on Israeli TikTok, because you got all the evidence you need right there to build an ironclad case. I've never seen a more clear example of savagery and barbarism on display for the world to see, where they're proud of it and they're bragging about what they're doing. We've seen TikToks where they, shit in a bag and throw it in a home and leave it there. We've seen TikToks where they, cook a meal in a Palestinian family's house and then they proceed to burn it down and they're all excited and happy about it after the fact. And here, I'll play this video for you so you get a sense of just how dehumanized the Palestinians are and how proud of their savagery the IDF is.
So I'm going through these terrorist houses looking for guns and explosives like we found money. And every single house inside of Gaza, this is what I say, every single, unbelievable. 2 or 3 doors stuffed with the most exotic laundry that you can imagine. Just pile loads of it. Every single house. Stuffed to the brim, look at that. Unbelievable. Well, I don't even want to imagine what this stuff is, man. Oh, let me smell. These naughty, naughty Gazans.
So what I would ask you, watching this video, is how on God's green earth can you square this with the idea that all the IDF doing is a hunt for Hamas? You know, and I know, and everybody knows, that is totally unverified, unfounded, completely untrue, and all of the evidence contradicts it. All right, so now you got this this peach here. How many times have we seen videos from this one, this Israeli ambassador? Look, I love her, to be honest, because, again, she says the quiet part out loud and doesn't realize it, and I hope the South African attorneys are just casually taking notes, because this stuff will be very useful in the genocide trial. Listen to what she says here.
Those areas must be destroyed, and one of the things we exposed to the world after getting into the areas in Gaza that we try to find all those tunnels and underground metro city that Hamas has built, thanks to this great support of Iran, Qatar, the international community generosity, everything turned to be this horrible terror city. One of the things we realized that every school, every mosque, every second house has an access to tunnel. So this is, and of course, ammunition.
But that's an argument for destroying the whole of Gaza, every single building in it.
So do you have another solution how to destroy the underground tunnel city, that this is the place where the terrorists hide, where they have all their ammunition, and this is the rockets that are still fired on Israeli cities?
In other words, we had to destroy every school, every mosque, every hospital, every other house. We had no choice but to totally wipe Gaza off the map in every way, shape, and form, and, according to Euromed Monitor, killed 92% innocent civilians. My advice to this woman is keep talking. Please, keep talking. All right, here we go. This is interesting. A secret assessment from the Defense Intelligence Agency casts doubts about Israel's prospects for success if it mounts a significant escalation against Hezbollah, saying IDF resources will be spreading too thin given the war in Gaza. So, in other words, what happens here, I agree with this tweet where they say, clearly, these leaks are coming because significant parts of the U.S. security and intelligence establishment are convinced Israel is dragging the U.S. into catastrophe. Biden isn't listening to them, and they see no other way to stop it. So, interesting thing happened a few weeks ago where you had, like, the intelligence agency-aligned Democrats, like Abigail Spanberger and others, they came out and were like, ceasefire. We got to have a ceasefire. Now, the reason why that's bizarre is because usually the deep state-aligned Dems, the CIA-aligned Dems, they're hawkish and they're for war. But in this instance, all of a sudden, they're pumping the brakes. Why are they doing that? Because they realize exactly what Netanyahu is doing, and they realize that this is an attempt to get the U.S. into a war with not only Hezbollah, not only to help them with Hamas, but also to go against the Shia militias in Iraq and Syria and go to war with Iran. And so this is the CIA and the intelligence agencies going, don't do it. This is insane. This is insane. And one of the points they make is, you've perpetually underestimated, and Israel has perpetually underestimated Hezbollah. And we already have evidence that they're right when they say you're underestimating them, because they just took out parts of an Israeli Air Force base that nobody thought they'd be able to get to. Everybody thought, well, Iron Dome will protect this Israeli Air Force base. They made it more difficult for the IDF to continue missions in North Gaza because they used that air base for that, and now parts of it are absolutely destroyed. And they also have more advanced weaponry than anybody thought they had. So this is U.S. intelligence saying, this is too crazy even for us. But of course, Biden is going right along with whatever Netanyahu wants to do. So it looks like it's inevitable that the U.S. will get involved in a more widespread war here. And we're doing it because Biden didn't have it in him to tell Netanyahu, hey, pump the brakes and reel it in. You've gone too far. So this went viral the other day. Former U.S. Vice President Mike Pence wrote a message on U.S. weapons that will be dropped on civilians in Gaza. This is something we've seen a lot of. You have the IDF writing names on bombs and then using it to carpet bomb babies. Mike Pence is proud and glad to have his name on a weapon that will be used to massacre civilians. I'm not surprised even in the slightest. Biden's own campaign staffers warn that volunteers are quitting in droves. That is not enough to merely be the alternative to Trump, and that his refusal to change course on Israel-Gaza is a moral stain and imperils his re-election. So this is an article in Newsweek. Look, let me be clear. The Biden team has actually come out and said, no, what we think is going to happen is people will forget everything that happened in Gaza, everything that happened with Israel by Election Day. That's their argument. The argument is they'll just forget it. I don't know, man. There's a lot of dead bodies of babies that are piling up in the Gaza rubble. We have over 12,000 children who have been killed. Over 27,000 innocent civilians. North Gaza has been wiped off the map completely. There's still a total medieval siege. No food, no fuel, no water, no electricity for all of the people of Gaza, all of those civilians. There's only 30,000 max. Hamas. 30,000. 2.3 million people in Gaza. I don't think this is something people just get over. Incredibly naive, incredibly stupid. He's caught like he's living in like 1982 mentally. Israel has turned Gaza into an experimentation lab for its weapons startups. Top venture capital funds in the Silicon Valley are pouring money into these companies that are field testing their dystopian weapons on the Gazan population. Profits and sales are soaring. This was a Haaretz article. The way that the death and destruction doesn't matter. This is just part of a plan to experiment with weapons startups. It says a lot, doesn't it? So this was really interesting. Here you have a guy, Tariq Kassab. This guy resigned from the Biden administration in protest over Biden's policy to support Netanyahu's slaughter of innocents in Gaza. Let's watch some of this.
The Israel-Hamas war is setting President Biden at odds with American voters, his own supporters, and members of his own administration. Late today, Tariq Kassab, a first-generation Palestinian-American and Biden administration political appointee at the Department of Education, resigned over Biden's Gaza strategy. In his resignation letter to Education Secretary Miguel Cardona, Kassab wrote, quote, "The actions of the Biden-Harris administration have put millions of innocent lives in danger, most immediately for the 2.3 million Palestinian civilians living in Gaza who remain under continuous assault and ethnic cleansing by the Israeli government. Therefore, I must resign. I cannot stay silent as this administration turns a blind eye to the atrocities committed against innocent Palestinian lives in what leading human rights experts have called a genocidal campaign by the Israeli government."
I mean, it's heartbreaking. It hurts. It is a dehumanizing thing to hear from the president of the United States, someone who you worked so hard to campaign for and elect and support his policies, that, you know, your life is not valuable. Your identity means less than other people's identities, and it's okay that tens of thousands of people who look like you and who have similar backgrounds and heritage are dying and being massacred.
Now, remember, guys, Arab Americans and Muslim Americans, they supported Biden at about 60% or so. And now that's down to below 20%. Omar Badr goes on to point out here that this same guy, Tariq, does an interview on CNN as well. And he said that a lot of people within the government and the administration are raising concerns about his Israel policy, but the president is undermining our democratic ideals by refusing to listen to his supporters and to the American people. So this is yet another example of the hilarious, comical, idiotic, absurd double standard. This is John Kirby, this dunce. He's going to, in one clip, you're going to see the way he reacts to claims of genocide against Russia in Ukraine, and then claims of genocide against Israel and Gaza.
That the Russians were committing war crimes. This is of a piece of that, as devastating disgusting and sickening as it is. And that's why we're going to participate with the international community on making sure that we can document the evidence of these war crimes so that Russia can be held properly accountable when it's over.
And where does this put Washington and Pretoria in?
We find this submission meritless, counterproductive, and completely without any basis in fact whatsoever.
By the way, let's just be clear. Anybody who reads the South Africa report cannot walk away saying that these charges are meritless. And by the way, what they're doing here, first and foremost, is asking for an International Court of Justice, basically an injunction to say Israel needs to stop doing what they're doing right now while the rest of this is adjudicated, which will probably take a couple years. But the whole point is, if it's remotely possible, if it's remotely plausible that what Israel is doing can be considered a genocide, then the International Court of Justice can say, you have to stop what you're doing, and then we're going to further adjudicate this. And I don't see how anybody could disagree with the notion that it is at least possibly, plausibly, potentially a genocide. So, by the way, we're going to see, man, because, I mean, and you could go listen to the Martyr Made podcast about Israel and the Palestinians. It's really interesting, really informative, a lot of history in there. When the UN was first created, basically, Israel was like the first question that they dealt with. And in the process, like coming up with the partition plan, initially it was going to be struck down. But then there's a lot of reports of flat out bribery behind the scenes, which then led to the partition plan being passed. So what I fear most is that there will be some efforts behind the scenes in smoke-filled back rooms to effectively bribe the International Court of Justice, or I should be clear, bribe the countries that are involved, and then effectively quash this whole thing. You know, I'm waiting for it, but politics is just as dirty, if not more dirty than you think, and oftentimes merit and the truth don't rule the day. So I hope I'm wrong. We'll find out very soon. All right, so this is interesting. France and Jordan teamed up to airdrop 7 tons of aid to civilians and aid workers in Gaza. So to me, this smacks of, hey, we've been backing the U.S., we've been backing Israel, we've been backing the West in this campaign. We don't want to be dragged in to potential lawsuits and trials for violating international law and aiding and assisting a genocide. So this is like a quick reversal of course to say, no, we took the extra step. We even airdropped some aid, so we're on your side, bro, totally. So the pro-Palestinian protesters are still at it. I'm seeing stories every single day. In this instance, pro-Palestine protesters occupy and shut down the California state capitol. You have a lot of them here. Again, there's a number of examples of this that are happening on a daily basis now. People getting out there, making their voices heard. So this is on Talk TV. Man, this clip is frustrating. This clip is frustrating. Watch this.
You say you don't approve
And
of...
do you think that Israel is a democratic country?
I know that Israel is a democracy. They have elections.
No, this man is now has 4 courts against him because of 4 cases of corruption. This man knows if the war stops,
we haven't got time to do the entire history of Benjamin Netanyahu, who is not a popular figure in Israel. I'm not here to defend Benjamin Netanyahu. Mustafa, is it possible to...
Whenever I speak about Palestinian rights or Palestinian situation, you claim it is history. I'm talking about what's happening today.
No, I know, and
this is not history.
Can we just... You talked about how you don't want Israel. You're saying Israel that October the 7th happened. You're placing that in historical context. I understand that. Please don't say that again. We don't have time for it. You've made that point 5 times already.
I don't know what you have time for.
Oh my God! For the love of God, let me finish a sentence, man. Maybe you're not used to women talking. I don't know, but I'd like to finish a sentence, sir. Anyway. So,
no, you are misleading the public now by
right,
claiming
I've got 20 seconds left. I'm not even going to bother trying to answer. If you don't think Israel's reaction is acceptable, what would have been an acceptable reaction to you? You've got 10 seconds left.
To end occupation and allow peace to prevail for both people.
That's their reaction. Brilliant. Yeah. Sorry to have been a woman speaking to you, but there you are.
Wow. This is how pro-Palestine voices are treated oftentimes in Western media. All right. So public hearings on South Africa's request, this is the genocide charges against Israel, will take place on January 11th and 12th at the ICJ. The hearings will be live streamed from 4 to 6 and 1 to 3 a.m. Pacific on the court's website and on UN Web TV. So I just wanted to let everybody know that this first move here to get an injunction against what Israel is doing is happening very, very soon. And that's a good thing. All right, and finally, this was a big story that came out the other day. This is from Ken Klippenstein in The Intercept. CNN runs Gaza coverage past team under Israeli military censor. So I don't know if you guys remember, but early on in the conflict, there were all these reports that Israel was basically setting up an office of censorship. And I think they even called it an office of censorship. So in other words, if anything, if we don't agree with the media coverage happening, we're just going to censor people. We want the media to parrot our narrative, our perspective. Don't be sympathetic to the Palestinians. And it was very blunt in the sense that it's yeah, we're just going to censor things that don't fit our narrative. Well, now we learn that the CNN coverage that is coming out of Gaza has to get approved by an Israeli censor. So in other words, you're just getting propaganda. Now, I want you to do a thought exercise here for a second for me. What if all of the CNN coverage coming out on this conflict had to be approved by Hamas? What would the reaction be of the West? They'd be like, oh, this is garbage. This is garbage. This is just flat out propaganda. Well, what is it when the IDF, a military in the midst of a genocidal campaign, when they have to approve your coverage? Again, total garbage. Total embarrassing. This is embarrassing. This is journalistic malpractice. Would you allow some authoritarian regime to have veto power over coverage you do of it? Would you allow that? In any other context, this is absurd, but in the context of Israel, they get an exception. And the IDF gets to censor what Americans see. And you wonder why, for example, the boomer generation is still, yeah, rah, Israel with what you're doing in Gaza. Because they don't see 90% of the stuff coming out of there that you and I see. Anyway, there you have it. Horrible stuff here. The escalations are happening by the day. Palestinians are still suffering beyond imagination. Again, we're still at the point, over 30,000 dead Palestinians, over 27,000 of them are innocent civilians, over 12,000 dead kids. Those numbers are going to keep going up. And now we're having the conversation about Hezbollah getting more directly involved. We're having the conversation about a more widespread regional war. At this point, it appears unavoidable, and the U.S. is cheering it on every step of the way. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.